Gazing upon the rolling fields of the Palouse, observers are often impressed by the technology of the harvest. The immensity and sheer complexity of the farm machinery is remarkable. These same observers seldom understand the evolution of dryland farming technologies. Understanding the techniques of harvest days past can help place today's efforts in perspective and can give insights into the daily life of Palouse area farmers past and present. Farming began on a small scale in the Palouse area in the 1860s and 1870s. Incoming settlers chose bottomlands along streams for their farmsteads. Most of these pioneers came from the east, where bottomlands were more fertile than hillsides, and bottomland soil more conducive to agricultural development. Such was not the case in the Palouse. Settlement in the creek bottoms restricted field and farm size. There simply was not enough available bottomland to expand. The small size of these farms, along with the general unavailability of efficient equipment, led to the use of primitive cultivation and harvest methods. Many of these early pioneers broke the heavy Palouse sod with clumsy single-bottom walking plows, plows affectionately named foot burners by those who knew them best. They then harrowed the soil as best they could to break up the clods before planting. Pioneers who had horse-drawn seed drills used them for planting, but many sowed their grain by the hand broadcast method and harrowed the soil a second time to cover the seed. Some Palouse area pioneers had access to early mechanical harvesting equipment, reapers and horse-powered threshers. But most of the smaller farms were harvested by hand using a cradle, a hand scythe furnished with wooden racks. These laid the grain evenly on the ground to allow easier hand bundling later. The grain would then be hand thrashed by pounding with a flail or was separated under the hooves of walking horses. These methods were inefficient, and the farmers' frustration with their use added incentive and impetus for further machinery development. By the end of the 1870s, the Palouse farmer had moved out onto the hillsides. By using dryland farming techniques, basically deep plowing, followed by frequent after-cultivation, he found he could expand his acreage and increase his yields. At the same time, horse-powered machinery was more readily available, and with larger fields to till, farmers generally leaped at the opportunity to obtain new and more efficient equipment. Horse-drawn gang plows alleviated the agonizing walk back and forth across the fields one furrow at a time with the foot-burner plow of earlier years. And each horse team pulling a two-bottom 18-inch gang plow could turn about 5 acres of hilly Palouse soil per day. 9 horses and a 4-bottom plow could turn about twice that amount. Efficiency rose and more ground was placed in production. Expansion required the adoption of other horse-drawn implements as well. Seed drills, dump reapers, and other equipment quickly became standard. Binders and headers took over the harvesting chore as farm technology continued to develop. Binders were often used in areas with shorter growing seasons where the grain did not have time to ripen on the stalk. The grain was cut near the ground, bundled, and left to dry prior to thrashing. Headers were the preferred equipment on ripened grain, where only the head of the grain was taken to be run through a separator or thrashing machine. By the 1880s and 1890s, thrashing machines were in common use in the Palouse. Horse-powered thrashers, powered by several horses harnessed to a revolving wheel and drive shaft assembly, were the earliest stage in separator development. But machines powered by steam engines quickly took over. Thrashing outfits were generally set up in the center of the field, and the grain was cut in ever-widening circles about the machine. The crop was then brought to the separator by wagon. These outfits were often crewed by itinerant workers who migrated seasonally into the Palouse to work the harvest. At other times, thrashing was a cooperative effort among friends and neighbors. Either way, thrashing was a large-scale, labor-intensive operation. In the 1890s, technological advances provided the Palouse farmer with his first combined harvester thresher, or combine, although these machines did not become common until a decade or more later. Early combines were horse-drawn and required up to 36 horses or mules as motive power. A breakthrough in technology, they provided both the cutting and separating actions within a single package. The first machines were ground-powered. All functions were operated from a friction wheel that rolled along the ground. Constructed mostly of wood, these combines were bulky, heavy, and required large teams for power. Later machines operated with fewer animals because, although still pulled by horses, they used a gasoline engine to run the cutting or threshing operations. Horse or mule-drawn combines were a vast improvement over the days of headers, binders, and steam threshing, but they still required a large amount of man and horsepower to operate. Regardless, horse-drawn combines, and in fact all of the machines of the horse-drawn era, occupy a large space in our collective nostalgic memory of Palouse agriculture. The romance of the horse lingers on, and the image of those combines in use captures the imagination. Nostalgia gives way to reality, however, and technological advances continued in the quest for increased production. Tractors could be seen on the Palouse hillsides during the 1920s. The horse-drawn combine was giving way to tractor-drawn machines by the 1930s. The onset of World War II, with its attendant labor shortages, entrenched the tractor firmly on the soil of farms across America. The Palouse was no exception. With the use of power machinery and other technological advances, like chemical fertilizers and pesticides, agricultural efficiency and the amount of acreage in production rose tremendously. In addition, farm organization altered as the farmer gladly switched to power machinery. He no longer needed to provision a large number of horses, and the tractor never had to be rested on hot days. Production technology, however, is only part of the overall picture. The Palouse farmer had to get his crop to market, and transportation also underwent technological change. In the early period, grain was bagged and hauled to shipping points by wagons on roads that generally left much to be desired. Bags were the desired mean of grain shipment due to the lack of bulk handling technology, the danger of shifting bulk grain in wagons and ocean-going sailing vessels, and the need to separate wheat varieties during transport. Bag grain began giving way to bulk handling soon after 1900, but custom is hard to break, and the process took several decades to complete. On the Palouse, the problem of getting the bag grain down from the high plateau to the river shipping points led to interesting developments in the form of grain chutes and tramways. Grain chutes proved inefficient, but trams, usually rail car or cable-slung bucket operations, were more useful. Several of these existed along the Columbia, Snake, and Potlatch rivers. Bucket trams, such as the one that stretched down the Great Hawaii on the Snake, operated on a continuous cable, much like modern ski lifts. Rail trams, such as the one that operated on the Snake River at Mayview in Garfield County, worked with two rail cars at either end of a line looped around a pulley with a brake system at the top of the grade. One car was loaded high on the plateau, while the other sat at the riverbank warehouse being emptied. The brake was then released, and the weight of the loaded car pulled the empty conveyance to the top, and the process was repeated. Riverbank warehouses served as shipping points out of the Palouse area. Steamboats carried goods to and from Portland from the 1860s until well after the turn of the century. From Portland, the wheat was loaded on ocean-going sailing vessels and later on steamers for shipment to other national and world ports. After the 1880s, railroads began handling more and more of the shipping business out of the area. Steamboats and the railroad coexisted for a time and were even mutually supportive, but the railroads finally overwhelmed the steamboat trade. Today, Palouse grain is tilled and harvested using ultra-modern tractors and combines with air-conditioned, more or less dust-proof cabs, stereo music, and citizen band radio. The crop is shipped in bulk from elevators instead of bagged grain flat houses. Transportation is provided by large trucks, railroad grain cars, and modern river pushboats and barges. Today's Palouse farm is large and efficiently operated thanks to the many advances in agricultural technology. Still, farming is no bed of roses. It is expensive to till a field, even with today's implements. While, technologically speaking, modern farming is a world apart from the early days of the foot-burner plows and hand broadcast seeding, the farmer still faces problems in the high cost of production and shipping and the vagaries of the marketplace.